I think we have a quorum of 6, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. I've been asked to chair the meeting because Adam's not with us any longer. He moved.
Yeah, he moved.
Let's just clarify. He moved.
No, that's not what I meant. He moved. He's
Bill,
happy.
tell us
He's gonna get
ourselves.
didn't go on. Everything's fine with that. Didn't mean to phrase it that way. Okay, people are welcome to attend this meeting. We also have a streaming on the library's YouTube channel, and the recording is made available after the meeting at the city's website. We also have a public comment period. Community members are invited to address the board during this time. Do we have any community members who wish to address the board? Okay. All right, so let's call to order. Steve?
Here.
Craig?
Here.
Angela? Yeah?
D is fine. Here.
D. Laura?
Present.
Okay, and Nick. The order of agenda. Should I have a movement to approve the agenda?
Go ahead. I move you to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Updates and reports. Committees and let's see. We're going to go to her presentation.
Yes,
Okay.
we'll go right to Allison.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you. Have help from Jeremiah, who we're going to mind meld, and eventually during this presentation, we will not have to say next slide. And he's going to help me make sure I'm on camera. Thank you for that.
Move it.
I thought I had to just be behind the line. Sorry. Allison Zelm, City Administrator, really appreciate being able to give you a little bit of an overview of the Renew Rochester initiative that's on the ballot on November 7th. We also have with me Cindy Steinhauser, Deputy City Administrator, so she will take a couple of the slides so that you won't just be tortured by my voice the entire time. So with that, I'm here just to provide you a little update so that you have a little bit more information. These are the same sessions that we're doing for different organizations that have invited us to speak and provide information about the ballot measure. So the next slide really kind of is a high-level overview of what the sales tax initiative for renewal of that existing 0.5% sales tax would fund. So an economic vitality fund of $50 million, a street reconstruction fund of $50 million, flood control and water quality at $40 million, and a regional sports and recreational complex at $65 million. So that would be collected over up to 24 years or until it reached $205 million, which is the total for all of those projects. And there's a lot more information at renewrochester.org, but it's really important to note that will be collected over the years up to the $205 million or the 24 years. And based on where we're sitting in the last 12 months, it's very possible that we could be there at about 15 to 16 years reaching that dollar amount. But of course, we don't know if that $15 million will hold. So we were trying to be conservative, and this is the years that we're in. 22 legislative session where we had only been collecting about $13.5 million a year in sales tax. So it's a little bit volatile. So we put the whole number of years in there to make sure that we could deliver the projects if the community approved. So going on, we have been relying as a community on the sales tax one way or another for about a little over 40 years in the city of Rochester. So this has been a funding source that has funded many similar types of projects that you saw on the last slide, really starting off with building the existing flood control system and providing some capital reserve to put away to continue to maintain. And you can see throughout this, there's been continuous reinvestment in the flood control system. And so we have been relying on that source of funding to be able to continue to grow the capacity of the flood control system. You can also start to see here that the legislature is a very important part of this, and depending on when the city went to the legislature or when we went to the voters, that's vacillated throughout the years, whether the legislature wants to vote first or whether they want the community to vote first. And there are times when the legislature has denied requests from the city council. And as you can see, that's where we went from a 1% sales tax down to that 0.5% that we've been at for the last 30 years or so. And so we've continued to fund major investments across the community, including the library. And then you can see that they were expanding the number of projects that were able to be funded through that legislative and local process. Some significant investment in higher education, transportation system, et cetera. And then moving on to the next slide, we continue to see that the community was interested in utilizing this source, and for that 40 years, the community has always reauthorized the sales tax to be renewed and extended at that 0.5% for the last 30 years. So again, you can see legislative approval, voter approval has sometimes vacillated, and the legislature really establishes that framework. 2012, a lot of projects, all of these were one ballot measure, because regardless of if there's 1 or 4 ballot measures or 26 ballot measures, it's that same 0.5% that you'd be paying about, about a nickel on $10 of taxable goods. So again, significant projects back in 2012 that were able to be invested in with that source of revenue. So moving forward, I do think it's also really important just to kind of reframe. This is a similar type of process, but the legislature, the framework that we've been in since 2019 is can't have more than 5 projects, so that's new, as you can see from 2012. Went back to being legislature first, and some different provisions about what in their mind. Now, granted, all of these are special bills in the legislature, so it's a framework. But very much tighter on what types of projects the legislature was interested in pursuing and funding, perhaps because about 1/4 of all cities have a local option sales tax now. Back in 1982, we were very rare city to have access to local sales tax. So in the next slide, just a bit of a reminder about the importance of the legislature. Although this is a local sales tax, the legislature has to agree and approve what's in there. The city council did approve a single ballot question, which is on the ballot now for anyone who's familiar. The absentee in person and absentee by mail is already going on, and direct balloting will be getting started soon. And that is the same approach that we've taken for all of the most recent ballot initiatives. Slide. Ballot language, not nearly as exciting. But of course, we have to write the ballot language very specifically to what the actual legislation provides because of the importance of that legislative authority. So really what this is asking the community is this source of funds still a good way to continue to reinvest in the community? If so, you would continue to pay the 0.5% sales tax as you had the day before on the day that the sales tax would go in. And on the next slide, another important thing to think about, I already mentioned, so for $10, it's 5 cents. If you think about it on the perspective of $100, that would be 50 cents at a 0.5% sales tax, so that would just continue, not an increase. The other thing that I'm not sure people always think about is that we just did a study in 2021 with the University of Minnesota, and this is probably a conservative number based on when we did this study. You might remember a little thing happening in 2020, 2021. But 43% of this is paid by non-residents. So it's a funding source that doesn't rely entirely on property owners. In Rochester, 4 projects that folks that are just living in city of Rochester don't just benefit from those. We have a lot of commuters coming in on our roads. We have a lot of visitors that would benefit also, and this shares the cost of those projects with others. The other thing to point out is that not everything actually is subject in Minnesota, which is the same for local sales tax. So groceries are not subject to the sales tax. Clothing is not. Most baby products are not. Prescription and over-the-counter medication are not subject to the sales tax. So on average, the average resident pays about $60 in sales tax a year. Now, that's not every resident, but if you take the average. So moving to the next slide, this is where I'm going to let you hear from Cindy. So she's going to give you a little bit of an overview of the first 3 projects, and then I will come back. and things. That is really important.
I am standing on the X. Good. Okay, great. So, hello, that's Cindy Steinhauser, Deputy City Administrator. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So the first one project that I want to talk about is the Economic Vitality Fund. Where of the $205 million, it's a $50 million fund. The largest portion of this money is intended to deal with the housing situation in Rochester. The City of Rochester, along with Olmsted County, DMC, and Mayo Clinic, are part of the Housing Coalition with the Community Foundation. Since 2018, we have been updating a housing assessment, housing needs study. Senior housing is one of our top needs in this community, but affordable housing is a great need, and so we really see that this fund is probably the most flexible funding opportunity that we have compared to some of the other funding mechanisms we have to encourage and promote affordable housing in the community. The others have more restrictions. So what we want to do is prioritize this in the creation of additional affordable housing, particularly middle and low income residents, and then the preservation of existing affordable housing options. That message when I said that senior housing is the number one option, number one need coming out of the Maxfield study. To help you understand that we've got a lot of seniors that are in homes that are probably too big for them. They even feel they're too big for them, but they don't have an affordable option to relocate to a house that's more manageable for their size, their household size, and freeing up that home for a larger family or a young family starting home with kids, or just a young family wanting to get their first home. And so creating those options to start to create some shift in the products that are available, that's what we're talking about when we say the preservation of existing affordable housing, and then obviously the creation of additional housing. We currently need about 400 single-family housing units in production every year to start to meet up with demand. We're doing about 200 this year. That's where we're currently sitting. So obviously, if we do not get out in front of this issue, it'll start to become an even more exponential gap for us. And then the last thing is allowing money for workforce development. And in this category, previously this has helped fund the EBA fund through READY. So this would, a portion of the $10 million out of the $50 million would replenish that fund. That was a $5 million fund established in 2012. That money goes to help promote retention and recruitment of existing businesses and employees. But we also see, we've learned a lot from some of the workforce partnerships that we've had over the last couple of years, and really see that this is a fund that can help us to advance training to meet future workforce needs, as well as entrepreneurship opportunities. So street reconstruction. Rochester has grown. Heard a really startling piece of data the other day in that in 1950 we were 5 square miles. We are now 56 square miles. We've got a lot of streets. We've got a lot of infrastructure. We do a pavement condition index that does an assessment of the condition of our streets. You can see the various conditions of the streets in the city of Rochester. You can only mill and overlay so many times, and at some point you have to surrender to a full street reconstruction. About 24% or 100 miles of the city streets are 50 years or older, and they are in that poor or fair condition. This funding tool allows us to continue that investment into our public infrastructure and start to tackle the deterioration of some of these streets. If we are not able to do that, no actions taken, we'll have over 350 miles of streets that will be in that poor condition. We've got a lot of commuters, so back to that number of 43% contribute to, from outside the community, contribute to this fund. The fact that we have 30,000 people that commute daily, and so they're using our services, so the fact that they're also helping to pay for reinvesting in the infrastructure. Then the third one I want to talk about is flood control and water quality. Again, this sales tax was originally started to address flood control in the 80s with the city. And we have a massive flood control system. I would really encourage everybody to go to the website. There's lots more data and great story, particularly around the impact of flooding in our community and what it does. It goes well beyond the downtown area. Most people associate a lot of the weather events and the flooding that have happened with the dramatic flooding, which certainly was dramatic, 8 feet, 9 feet of water in businesses and homes in the downtown area. But it's spread throughout the community. Right now, the system protects about $1.5 billion in assets, right? And so what we want to do is continue to invest in the system. We will, these dollars will go towards not only expanding existing capacity, enhancing what we currently have, but growing our capacity upstream and not just down here in the downtown area. Also, water quality is a big issue that continues to be water quality legislation continues to come down at the federal and state level. So again, these dollars not only support flood control, and stabilization, but water quality as well. Another piece of this, we cannot use stormwater money for anything other than flood control. And so a lot of the flood control system that you see in the city of Rochester has greenways, those nice enhancements. So we know that this is infrastructure that sits adjacent to neighborhoods, and we've been able to enhance it using these dollars by creating greenways and trailways. So this would continue that investment of and supporting that kind of add-on to a flood control system. With that, I'll turn it back over to Allison to talk about
Sports and
sports
recreation.
and recreation.
There's more than one slide on this one. So Regional Sports and Recreation Complex is the fourth project. There's a reason it's the largest dollar amount because it's vertical construction. It's a much more significant, it's a project versus a number of projects that could be funded by those other project areas. So we did start talking to the community in February about a regional sports and recreation complex with some partners in the private sector. Worked through a stakeholder group, met with and did a lot of community engagement, and through that, what was the intent in the 2022 legislative year expanded. The dollar amount didn't expand, but shifted to be more indoor area. We heard that loud and clear from the community that the multi-purpose indoor concept was something that was really, really important. People were having a lot of trouble getting space. So something that's not unfamiliar to the library, but from some different community uses. So they were also not just interested in that sport and recreation concept, but also flex spaces for the community, indoor children's play area for different times of the year. And then from the outdoor perspective, which got a little bit smaller, having the opportunity for multi-purpose fields. And the concept here is that it would be of a caliber, that it could be an anchor and have the right number of amenities to attract tournaments to help the financial model. But the primary use throughout the week and really throughout the year would still be local residents, because that provides you the opportunity to keep it more open during the day, during the week, evening, to be able to support practice, drop-in, etc. throughout the week. And so moving forward, what that resulted in, and this is like a pie chart. Think of it like a pie chart. This is what one building would look like, and the way you know that is that all the hallways and circulation will not be a lobby. But the concept here is the major anchor, so the largest area that would be dedicated would be for that multi-purpose courts for indoor. And why 16 volleyball? Why 8 full basketball? If you only have 6 basketball, you can't really support that tournament level. So in order to be able to have that tournament component, you need to have this amount of space for being able to attract those events, and you still get a lot of space for all of those other types of supports. There's also been some work done to look at, so during the week you would have those multiple lines laid out already, but if you wanted to have, say, a pickleball tournament, they actually have a floor that you can roll out over this that just has pickleball lines, and it has more of an outdoor surface like they're used to. So very quickly you could be changing over to pickleball for a tournament event, and then the rest of the next week be committed to the different book of business that you have there for drop-in and other. So then also some flex turf for indoor for practice for the winter, that children's play component, some cafe, obviously need some admin, circulation throughout, some team workout for practice or for tournament, but also some maybe a medical partner could be there for folks that are maybe be in the facility more, have some kind of partnership. And you can see also the desire to have it be something that could be expandable either through a public-private partnership, or if there's another initiative in the future, just understanding that there could be value in having a site that could also attract other components to it. Moving forward. So this is where like the size of the actual piece of land becomes important. So with that indoor facility and the outdoor component, about a 75 to 90 acre site. The closer you get to the 90 acres, the more ability you have for some of that future flexibility. But obviously we need to have enough parking, we need to have enough circulation for buses and for vehicles and maybe different parts of the building working at the same time differently. You can see those 12 multi-purpose turf fields again. Why is 12 important? Because if you're going to get a soccer tournament, you can have that many in order to attract a tournament. Very helpful to have them in one location. These would be turf fields, and again, aligned for multiple uses. So these expand the season significantly and also expand the playability throughout the day because you can, in March, start sweeping snow off. And if it rains in the middle of the summer, you don't have to wait and rest the field for a day in order to not destroy grass. Also, outdoor pickleball. So this would be 12 outdoor pickleball that would be supportive of an outdoor tournament. Outdoor basketball for more community value, and also for if there's folks that are there either doing a sport and they have their family with them and their kids want to play, etc. An outdoor playground and supportive space. So all of those things become very important. I failed to mention the raised walking area that also would serve for people to be able to view what would be happening when they're watching practice or they're at a next slide. We get a lot of questions about we don't have a site, where's the land? We don't have a funding source, so we don't have a piece of land. But we do have a lot of clarity around what kind of site would be ideal for this. Again, 75 to 90 acres is not a small piece of land. But there are a number of sites around town that you're probably already thinking of. It's important to have access to transportation and infrastructure. That would significantly lower the cost of this if we have the right kind of place or adjacent uses that are supportive, or adjacent zoning and infrastructure where some of those supports might start to come up over time. And then, of course, if there's an area in the system where this could serve to fill a significant gap, that would be helpful. Of course, if there is a new facility, it also changes the availability of some of the other facilities if it works better for some existing users. And that's also important. And on the next slide, you'll see just a sort of snapshot of what we predict based on how other facilities, similar types of facilities operate for estimated annual operating financials. I think the key here is just to note that in any of these scenarios, so whether it's all public employees or it's all for a private contract, it really is about making sure that whatever the scope of work and intent of the facility is delivered. So we heard also pretty loud and clear from the community that they want to make sure that there's available time. So that may result in any of these scenarios needing to subsidize some component of this, but even in sort of the public consideration, it was not a very significant subsidy beyond what you'd be able to bring in through rents for practice, etc., to be able to offset some of that either scholarship time or profit and available time or time for partners. Next slide. And then this is just kind of an example of a weekly schedule. I think what's really unique here is that, so you see the camps, the leagues, the clinics, those are some types of things that for community recreation to be able to have some of that community access perspective. We don't really have a recreation facility in the city that's not dedicated to someone or that doesn't have like a main user that funds a significant amount of it. So a good example, a volleyball center is busy all throughout the year. But during the daytime, it is a gym for the school. So you can't have pickleball during the day, which is when they could rent a facility or utilize a facility like this in most of the facilities that already exist because they're already dedicated to another partner user, which is a great model to have unless you need full of pickleball during the day. So if you have a sport that's during the day, they literally can't get into the space in Rochester. Same for basketball. A lot of the different facilities aren't really the right size to be able to run basketball clinics. So we have basketball players that are driving out to EOTA, which is fine, but not something that maybe people expect in their kids. So that is just a little bit of an example of the Sports and Recreation Center and the work that we did with the community. This is like a 5%, 10% conceptual design of like what you would build for. So if this was successful, we would be moving forward towards some of that like, final design, which would also involve a lot of conversation with the community. And I think the next slide is. So early in-person voting has started. I think most of the information has gone out for the direct balloting, and those direct balloting also occurs at the government center. the early in-person voting, that is the absentee by mail or in-person, it's at the county government center at the East Campus site. And then election day, of course, you can find a polling place. Probably one of the places to find that is the library. So on November 7th, folks can always go vote. The other thing we wanted to highlight on the next slide is just that we did really try to get to across the community. So we did release videos recently in English, Spanish, and Somali, short. I think they're about 2 minutes. Try to give an overview of what is the ballot question so that folks could be informed. So the next slide just says thank you, and where you can again go to reviewrochester.org if you have just questions in your own time or wanted to check out the information that was referenced, the whole study for the recreation, course and recreation center there, and a lot of other pieces. We are available for questions. If that's
So the board is encouraged to ask you. Yeah.
I have a question on one of the early slides on the housing. It said, particularly middle and low income housing, but is that like a continuation of the X percent of, if you build an apartment complex, you have to have 4, that's 65%.
AMI, yeah, so,
Or like,
yeah, we're not down into the actual very specific details of how does the program work, right? We know the greatest need is between 30% AMI, but oftentimes 30% AMI requires other kinds of subsidy on the operation side of things. But generally we're looking at likely projects that are 50 to 60%. And when you're talking single family, does it go up to 80% AMI? I mean, we want to evaluate that. Again, really good information that came out of the Maxfield study, and we want to align our policies with how these dollars roll out so that they can rate against other funding opportunities, whether the Housing Coalition, what the HRA has, what First Homes has. So we're kind of focusing on that 50 to 60% range, but we want to be clear enough to be able to get as many as possible.
Just say a few words about how this connects into the city's priorities.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I think it, and all three of them, particularly economic vitality, flood control, and streets, that number that I said before, that city used to be 5 square miles and now it's 6 square miles, like that creates a lot of pressure in terms of it. So our focus has been, and I think should continue to be, where can we infill, right? One of the council's strategic priorities is affordable living, so it goes beyond, spending no more than 30% of your income for rent or mortgage, but affordable living, if you take that number up to 40%, it includes what's the transportation experience for you, what's access to quality services for quality of living, and it goes beyond, hey, I need medical care, I need to get to the grocery store. Like we talked about as a team, you should be able to live here by choice, not circumstance. Oh, I have to live here because I can't afford to move elsewhere. No, I choose to live here because I can be independent of a vehicle and use the bus system and have quality housing and still have access to culture and recreation or sports. And so to me, they really weave together. So when we think about the flood control system, it should do more than manage flood control. It should help with groundwater and groundwater contaminants. In the older neighborhoods, we see a lot of pervious pavement. We see a lot of on-street parking because there's not private driveways. Because these are older neighborhoods, right? All of that creates runoff, all that goes into your groundwater. So there's an environmental piece to being smart about what we do in terms of infill and introducing things like plant materials and trail connections that help with mode shift, also manage those contaminants into the soil. And when you think about economic vitality, for example, when you're focusing on infill projects where you already have investment, you're not having to create new investment in terms of infrastructure. So your dollars go further. But certainly there is need. We have some need for single family housing. There's not many spaces that you can get a critical mass of single family housing. So when we think about if it happens in newer, more urban, suburban areas, where things like our microtransit pilot comes into play so that when we're thinking about systems wide, right? So when we think about housing, we think about connection, whether it's trail wise, we think about it from a transportation perspective, we think about it from quality experiences. So kind of going on, I could go on and on about sustainability and the intersectionality between economy, social equity, and environment. And I really think that the first three in particular, but also with the rec center, because as we've talked about, it really provides an incredible opportunity for us to think about what we have for recreation assets and how they might be redeployed. As Allison said, like this facility provides an opportunity to land this kind of use, which may open something up in the neighborhood. So suddenly you don't have to be transit dependent or transit independent to be able to have access to a recreational opportunity. Maybe we've now freed up something somewhere else in the system.
And there's also an opportunity to build that in a really like modern way, especially to be able to capitalize on some of the federal resources that are out there that will make the dollars go further and make whatever we build. Oh, I should always qualify with that. I was in my dream space for a second. To make sure that it is sort of a showcase facility, not just from access and being able to attract, but is built in a way where it's sustainable long term, makes it more financially sustainable, and lets us maybe try some things that we build things we have the opportunity to do that we can't always require.
Other questions? I have a few. I was looking at the statistics on the sales tax authorization tables that go from 1982 to 1998, and then it jumps to 2005 to 2012. So why does it stop at 2012? Is there
So that was the last local vote for the sales tax. So that would be expiring in the spring. So we were really hopeful that this would come to the legislature last session, so it could have been on the ballot in the last general election. However, the tax bill didn't get done at all that year. So legislature again. And so now the election that is available to us between now and the expiration of 40 years, sales tax is a revenue source.
So as we all know, there's a big space problem for this library, kind of the elephant. Yeah, everybody knows that, any staff person. And I looked at that table, and it looks like 1990 was the last time the library was funded.
Yes, and so that's also when others, I will say, this is a bit of an assumption on my part, but also when we went through our planning process, back in late fall of 2021, when we were like, oh man, we're starting to collect sales tax way faster than we haven't, we're getting close to that collection amount for years, and the collection amount kind of jumped up on us. I guess maybe people also invested a lot in their homes or something. COVID, but it really jumped up on us from that sort of like $10 million range to 13 to 15, so it accelerated very quickly. When we were talking, we did talk to a number of different stakeholders about could there be opportunities for partnership, et cetera, and the legislative framework was very clear: a site for recreation. It didn't even list flood control anymore, but we worked to try to get as many resources for the city as possible, despite some of that framework being way tighter than it had ever been before 2019. And when we were talking about the potential for maybe library or some kind of combination of things, the response from the legislative feedback was, we are not interested in getting library sales tax. Also, back in that time frame, there were not nearly as many cities that had gone through the process of local option sales tax. And this legislative session there was a real question mark if there was going to be any extensions or new sales taxes. And as so much so that there is a 2-year moratorium now, and they have a committee. And I would just say during that time frame, the legislature, this is good or bad, imposed a sales tax on the metro area. So I think there's a question mark about whether
Did they say why
stays
they
the same.
wanted it?
They were concerned,
But the library.
there's always been this back and forth with the local option sales tax. There are communities that don't have a significant, where if they had a 0.5% sales tax, they might build a $30,000 expansion and make that over. I mean, maybe I'm getting it. But there are some very small communities who really don't have access to a sales tax because they don't have that commercial base people.
How does that impact?
Yeah. How does it impact this?
Well, no, Rochester.
Well, because
Libraries.
we're part of the entire framework of the legislative system, and so
Yeah.
there's a lot of, every time someone comes forward with a sales tax, there's a lot of politics that happens about
Sure.
whether or not, is that fair? Is it fair that certain cities could have access to this? And someone might say, well, is it fair that local government aid formula doesn't work well for Rochester, but when you have 857 cities across all parts of Minnesota, fairness sort of goes
Yeah.
through the last 3 days of the
It's
legislature.
just
trying
that
to figure something out.
1990 is a long, I mean.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift was 1 year old.
I-
And the Berlin Wall had just come down.
Right.
I feel better now that
Some of those
Taylor
So
Swift.
it's been a long time. And so I'm not, I mean, it's somebody's fault. I'm
Yeah.
just noting that. And the fact that, well, so this half penny sales tax, if it was to be renewed, let's say it is, there have been a number of studies at different levels of the space needs in the library. Go back to 1990 something. And I've seen even in Post Bulletin, there's a Post Bulletin story on this from the 90s that I've seen in the office. So it's an issue that's gone. It's still an issue, and it's getting worse. So my question, one of the questions I had was, if the sales tax passes and it's used, I think you said like, expect maybe we'll get to the dollar amount in 15 years. Is it possible that another sales tax could be proposed during that time, or is that pretty much?
I think it's technically possible that you could go for an extension before your current sales tax expired. It may have some real legislative challenges, but because what you'd be doing is adding something and extending that end date beyond, or the dollar amount.
Require
But
a public vote.
yes, so
A
I mean, you would
legislative
still be
pass
going through
first.
the legislature. You would still be going to a public vote. So I think typically, in my experience, cities have waited until they've gotten closer to the end of the existing.
So it's kind of
then
unrealistic to think right now anyway, but a separate tax levy is another matter, right? You still have to, so there's a library study proposal before the city council, which if it passes, they would be co-sponsoring it with the library. So in that sense, it's the most serious study we have. So if that did come to pass, and we did have a library study, and we had a proposal and all of that, it would take a separate tax levy to finance that proposal, right? I mean, we can't go back and get another sales tax.
It would not be the sales tax.
Right.
It'd be a
But
different
it
funding.
could be some other funding source, and or the other thing about the projects that are in the sales tax extension, we haven't had the access in past sales tax extensions to be able to fund local roads. So what would it, I guess, from a future looking perspective, it takes future pressure off of some of our existing revenue sources that would otherwise likely need to be figured out how to be dedicated or help to fund some of the backlog of roads or figure out TIF or things of
Is
that
there
nature.
another alternative to a tax levy? And we expect, I mean, if this study went through, it would be, another year or two before we'd have a definite proposal.
Right.
And then we'd have to come up with. So a tax levy would have to be voted on by the public, let's say, I don't know.
So a tax levy that is just the property tax levy, or I'll give an example. So we received state bonding match for redoing the park maintenance facility, which if you've ever been in it, it's horrible. That people would be like shocked. It's people working in it. And so the match for that is likely going going to be some amount of financing, local financing that would be funded, some amount of that by property tax. That is a vote of the city council. So it's a public hearing, people could
Right.
oppose it.
So you wouldn't
There's a process.
necessarily have to have a separate levy.
Correct.
You could,
You could do something like the park referendum.
if the council found that they didn't have enough money. A tax levy could be proposed.
It could be. I think the other way to look at the total finances of the budget is if this became a priority, do whatever the result is, or some version of that. That isn't, perhaps that's something that we can talk to the state about. Perhaps there's any number of things.
So there's
that-
flexibility in the approach that if we get to that point.
And so when I say that, I mean, maybe there's an opportunity depending on what it is, where it is, what is there, that maybe the legislature would think it was a good bonding project, so then the match is less, or perhaps there's federal money available some year, but it needs some need, or maybe there's a partner. So I think there's any number of ways that we try to look at when when it's finally the right time for something.
Right, we'll keep in touch.
Yes, or say it's this facility, something, I mean, if there's a way to like really make this work better, even where you are now and decide to
That would
or you
depend on
start
what
on the
the
inside,
state
right, so depending on what it says, like, it may
Could
say,
be a
it might
branch.
provide access to different funds because it's accomplishing some other goal, that there's some funding source that we don't know about because we don't need it yet. And so we never really looked into it,
So
right,
there's
so.
Always hope.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up. Okay. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you for giving us so much time. I'm gonna leave some handouts if you want them by the door. I always forget to get them out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, other presentations, the Rochester Public Library Foundation.
It's for us out of town, so I think the report is in the Word packet. I don't know that we have anything else to add.
Friends of the Rochester Public Library.
I'm
Oh,
Val,
yes,
Val Kalashewski, president of the Friends. And since our last library board meeting, Friends have been pretty busy with a variety of activities through the city, through the library, and through ourselves. We participated, both Foundation and Friends participated in the Cascade Lake Park Community Celebration. We both had stands, we were lucky enough to be inside. And the foundation actually signed up people for be on their email distribution list. We actually made $160 selling used books out there. And we also passed out 150 store coupons. Our goal was to make sure that there's still a ton of people in Rochester who don't know that there's a bookstore here in the library. So we use community events like that as a way to get the word out. Both Foundation and Friends also participated in the library open house on October 1st. We had the bookstore open. We don't normally have the store open on Sundays. It's just a question of volunteer availability. But we opened special that day, and the store made, we had short hours. We weren't open the whole 10 to 6. We were only open 4 hours. They made about $200, which is normal for a day that they're open. And then Friends and Foundation board members staffed a volunteer station upstairs. Talk to patrons about volunteer opportunities within the library. What's Friends, what's Foundation. The library also hosted for its volunteers, Marilyn and several staff members held an event called the Great Volunteer Get Together. They had it be a state fair theme, and it was very entertaining. And there was tables where, and there was snacky foods to eat. And several volunteers commented on being able to have the social time to meet other volunteers that they wouldn't necessarily meet because they're participating in different activities. The bookstore held a nerd-approved sale that was the same time as a weekend of a nerd con going on at the Toledo Civic Center, and they made $940 that day, and they were only open for 4 or 5 hours. So at the library open house, they made $200, which was a normal day, and the nerd approved sale, $940. So we really appreciate Pat Stevenson who keeps an eye out for opportunities to do special sales like this. And then this past weekend, we had our autumn book sale. And I would like to report that we made $7,400 from 2 hours on Thursday night, all day Friday, all day Saturday, and 4 hours on Sunday. Book prices range from 50 cents to $2. Woo-hoo, very expensive books, and we made $7,400. We moved a lot of books. And this amount will cover the funding that Friends contributes to the annual subscription fees for several online database resources that the library maintains for its patrons. America's News, All Data Repair, which is a car repair resource, and the Morningstar Investment Center. So the annual subscription for those three together is about $7,000. And so we pay for it. I also want to throw out for foundation that they will be participating in the Give Minnesota fundraising event that's statewide on November 16th. And reach out to Brenda if you'd like to share a story or host a giving page for that event. And then they also have a holiday shopping auction coming up around Thanksgiving time. And then, as always, their annual WIT Gala. So, headlighting all of those. Any questions for Friends or Foundation? Great work. Thank you. We were excited. That $7,400 was a new record for an autumn sale, not for all of our auditorium sales. We've actually made $10,000 on a Rochester Fest sale before COVID. So we're gunning for a new, but we'd like to be making the 10,000, but the 7,000 is just, we're ecstatic. That was a great.
Thank you. Selco.
Yes. First, I want to apologize for being late. I had it on my calendar. So, it's recommended that as a trustee, I obtain a copy of the complete library trustee handbook. You have one of those on hand?
I will make sure you get one. Are you open to having it issued?
Sure. Well, no,
No,
because I don't have a Kindle.
I'll make sure you get one.
I mean, if it's a PDF version, yes. Fiscal year 2023 audit of Selco is complete, and Clifton Larson Allen for it. There were no findings. The Selco board members are required to sit on a committee, which I did not know when I accepted that role. Committee assignments were made, but they overlooked me when they were assigning them. So there was that role. However, they realized they had one vacancy open, which is the Selco Foundation representative for the Selco Foundation Board of Directors. And even though we're not part of the Selco Foundation, we don't put funding in there. Our library does not. I don't fill that role. Julie Kleinfelter, the library director for Austin Public Library, gave a presentation on creativity in public libraries, and called today's challenges drag queen storytelling. Very interesting. I was curious if we've ever done anything like that.
Not yet.
And that is very good.
Item 6, we can vote on these 4 items in a block. First one is the minutes for the library board meeting of September 20th. Accounts payable for September 12th, 2023, September 2023 monthly reports, and the contract signed by the library director. Do I have a motion? There a second? Are there any questions? I did have one that I brought up to the acting director, and she thought it would be good if I just brought it up. One was the book holdings on Rochester on the circulation report for September. And it reflects that in 2019, 218,000 books. To 2023, it was down to 195,000. And although the juvenile books have increased. And so I was wondering why, and kind of explain that.
And I'll explain it to the rest of you. Thank you for asking, because I think it is important to ask those kinds of questions, especially when one of the things that happened, especially during COVID, is we deferred the weeding of the collection. The weeding of the collection is really important to make sure that our shelves and our materials are accessible, and that we're removing outdated materials, and that we're removing items. As you all know, our space is at a premium, and items that we have in our collection need to earn that space. The Reader Services Division, which is my division, has been involved in a very aggressive weeding program for the last 2 years, and that's where you saw some significant changes. Weeding had also been very much deferred in the nonfiction collection, and a very aggressive weeding project has happened in that area. We need to make our spaces more accessible, and getting things off the top shelves and the bottom shelves. The weeding has allowed us to shift materials and make them more efficient to shelve. And while those physical collections were shrinking, yes, our digital collections were growing. It's always a balance.
The other question was the registration. That means that library cards has fallen from pre-pandemic to now.
So in 2019, prior to the pandemic, we have a regular process for expiring cards. Every 3 years, a card expires. We need to do that to keep our patron database accurate and up to date. A lot of things the library is charged for, different resources, including our ILS, are dependent on the number of library card holders we have. We really slowed that down. Actually, we stopped it during the pandemic. For 3 years, we did not expire any cards because the ability to get your card renewed and updated, and it was kind of, thing we just didn't do. Then we started slower to start expiring cards, and then eventually we caught up to what a normal process was. Another thing that may be why the numbers in 2023 are different from 2022 is when somebody created an instant digital card, and that is not included in those figures, that's just for access to the living database. We used to create and send out a regular library card as well. The return on the investment for that process was very low. People didn't update their Libby accounts with the new library accounts, and they weren't necessarily the people that were coming in. So that process of automatically adding cards also changed at the time when we were being more accurate with
So as things stand now, to renew a card, you have to physically contact the library. You can't sit on a computer.
At this time, we are exploring ways that we can do online verification. The thing about library cards is we need to verify that you're a taxpayer and live in this area. We have lots of different ways that we can do that. The online instant card uses a third-party verification system that allows us to verify that the person lives in that area. But we do not have an equivalent at this time for our physical cards. At least that is cost effective.
We may be.
We may in the future. There's some really exciting developments that we're
Okay. Okay, all right. Section 6 has been moved and seconded. Any other questions? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Number 7, election of officers. We will now vote on the slate of officers for the board. The following slate was shared at the September meeting. For president, for vice president, Angelique, and for secretary, Steve, I'm sorry, Paul. Okay. Do we have any nominations? Thank you. Do we have any nominations? Do I have a motion to approve the slate of officers for the remainder of 2023 and for all of 2024? Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Congratulations.
Thank you for all this work.
Let's see, informational items. All staff training.
I'm going to make this really quick since the first presentation was really long. For the first time in Rochester Public Library history, we are going to be closing the library on November 7th and dedicating time for staff development. 9th. It's the Thursday before the day we are to close on
It's a
the
night.
Friday. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a long day, sorry about that. Why are we doing this, right? First of all, we are in a 7-day schedule every week of every month, all year long. And it makes it really challenging to get folks together for a staff development day. We also had a suggestion from staff to have a staff development day. Most larger libraries and library systems do this. We just really haven't been willing to close. One of the things that we have found in doing the budget for it is a really cost-effective way to provide training for a lot of people in a short amount of time. We are piloting this for this year, and we will certainly be evaluating it. We're going to be closed all day Thursday, November 9th, the correct date. We're also going to be closed the next day for the Veterans Day holiday. The Friends Bookstore will also be closed, but your virtual branch is always open. Overdrive and Bookbox will be available for library resources. We have, I sent the updated printed list for the all staff training day. If you are interested in participating in that staff training day with the teammates, by all means, please ask me for the link so that you may register. These are topics that were developed in partnership with the city teammates, with the Rochester Public Library teammates. These were all things that people wanted to learn more about. And that's how we selected those items. And it's going to be a full fun-filled day. And yes, there will be we have a wonderful planning team that has helped make this happen. The names are listed here. Ingrid Alvarez and John Allen from Youth Services, Catherine Stetcher from Reference, and Boom, who represents both the technical services and services. That's it. Any questions?
Great. Very exciting.
Anything else? Notice we have a new board person, Brian, and you can maybe pronounce your name correctly.
My name's I lost my voice. I was outside. But Not me. I go to school. I'll graduate. Hopefully. I have a daughter. We're married for 3 years. I've always lived in Rochester besides. I like to draw. I do a lot of that.
Glad you're here.
What are you going to school for?
Communications. Unless you have
I believe
There
they
he
do.
is. There he is, yeah.
All right, thank you. Well, and we double checked with the city clerk on the actual road rules order for adjournment. And the city clerk says you need a motion. Second.
Contrary to Robert
Well,
rules, but that's fine.
all right, can I have a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So what did the city clerk say about it?
I didn't talk.
Yeah.
What's that?